I am 60 years old. My life has been touched by suicide 4 times. I didn't know the first suicide victim that I encountered. I was maybe 11 years old when a man laid down on the tracks in front of a train close to where I was playing football with my friends. I only saw the aftermath, a headless, lifeless body clad in a beige corduroy suit, a large red V of blood on his chest. The second time suicide ripped its way forcibly into my life was when my former business partner took his own life, leaving behind a wife and 6 children. I'd worked with him on and off for about 15 years at that point. My third brush with suicide came when the father of one of my wife's oldest friends took his own life just a few years ago. And then yesterday, I attended the funeral of a 32-year-old man I'd known since he was about 5 years old. He was my son's best friend. My son helped carry his coffin as he was laid to rest, a job that no one in their 30s should ever be required to do. My relationship with each of those victims was different, from non-existent to fleeting to close. But 4 suicides across the span of 60 years feels like a lot. That number feels too high, way too high. Now, maybe I've just been unlucky. Maybe that number is an anomaly. Or maybe I'm typical. Maybe the law of averages dictates that we will all encounter suicide a few times in our lives, unless we work in the field of demolition and construction, where the rate of suicide is almost 4 times the national average. According to the Office for National Statistics, the suicide rate among the general population in the UK is roughly 10.7 per 100,000 people. In construction, that number is 34 per 100,000 people. Now, this is far too serious a subject for overly simplistic mathematics. But imagine that my 4 suicides in a lifetime is, in fact, pretty typical. If you extrapolate that out, you could encounter suicide 13 or 14 times across the span of a demolition or construction career. Now, 4 suicides seems too many for a lifetime, but 14 is unimaginable, preposterous. And yet, whenever I speak or write about this subject, it resonates. It strikes a chord of familiarity within the industry. Now, it would be wrong to say that suicide is so common that it's been almost normalised in the industry, but it's definitely common enough for a very large proportion of the sector to have been touched by it in some way. It's not a single catastrophic event like a Grenfell fire or a Didcot boiler house collapse. Instead, it's a slow, incessant trickle, a trickle that happens quietly in the background, like the constant drip, drip of water on rock. It erodes, it wears down. It doesn't make the national industry news headlines because each industry suicide is separate and distinct. And yet it gnaws away at the very foundation of the industry, robbing us of valuable workers and, way more importantly, robbing families of husbands, fathers, and sons. Suicide is indiscriminate. When I think about those I've encountered, they were a mix. One was a husband, father, and grandfather. One was a husband and father. One was single, seemingly within his entire life ahead of him. One common trait they all shared is that all 4 of the suicides that I've encountered were men. Women take their own lives too, I fully understand that, but this does look and feel like a very male thing. In fact, statistically, men are roughly 3 to 4 times more likely to kill themselves than women. And since demolition and construction remain stubbornly male-dominated, perhaps it's easy to see why the sector suffers more than its fair share of suicides. Maybe this isn't a construction thing. Maybe it's really a male thing. None of which makes it any more excusable or palatable. None of which makes it any less tragic. I keep coming back to that number. 4 suicides across a 60-year lifespan. Last year, there was a question doing the rounds on social media. How many owls would you need to see in a day before suspecting something might be wrong? Most people said that if they saw 1 or 2 owls, they'd consider it a happy coincidence, a rare treat. Alarm bells would start ringing if they saw 3 or 4 owls in a single day. Repeated exposure to seemingly rare events like owl sightings or suicides obviously signals a deeper issue. When I saw the aftermath of my first suicide, I went back to my football game with my friends and we barely spoke about what we'd seen. Having now seen 4, my alarm bells are ringing loudly and constantly. The COVID-19 pandemic is estimated to have killed more than 7 million people worldwide. That pandemic brought the world to a standstill and was the only talking point, publicly and in the media, for roughly 2 years. I knew only 2 people that died as a result of COVID, half as many as I know that have been killed by suicide. And still I return to that number, 4 suicides across my 60 years. It haunts me, not just for the lives lost, but for what it signifies. If this is typical, what does that say about our society, our industry, our understanding of mental health? How many more do we need to lose before we acknowledge the silent epidemic that's taking place around us? The construction industry, with its stoic macho culture and relentless pace, seems particularly vulnerable. But beyond statistics and studies, these are human lives, sons, fathers, friends. My son is broken by the knowledge that he was unable to pull his best friend back from the precipice. In all likelihood, he will carry the weight of that loss for the rest of his life. And that burden will be far greater than the weight of any coffin. I don't have the answers, just questions. And the biggest question of all is this: how can we make it stop?